This is emergency broadcast number 3. America has been violating all of these laws of money for all of these years. I knew something was going wrong all these years, but I didn't get the bigger picture of it.
The de-dollarization, the lack of demand for the dollar, is going to increase inflation exponentially.
Inflation in the United States has hit 4-decade high. Lower income households face the worst of the crisis.
In May, inflation hit 8.6%, the highest in 40 years.
Venezuela, of course, a country where prices double every few weeks.
Inflation reached its peak. To meet this crisis, the government simply printed more money.
If the same amount of goods existed in the economy, but there was twice as much money, then we would think that the price of everything would double.
The infusion of cash into the financial system has renewed concerns that inflation could surge.
Simply flooded the system with money.
Yes, we did. Be very, very afraid of those who are sound asleep at this moment, because when they wake up, they're going to wonder what happened. So this is emergency broadcast number 3. Number 1 was about warning people, saying the FDIC and the Federal Reserve Bank will determine which banks survive and which ones die. Number 2 is, what does it mean when Japan and Mexico want to join the BRICS? And emergency podcast number 3 is not for you who are paying attention. Emergency podcast number 3 is be careful for those who are not paying attention, that are not prepared. And they don't care because they hope America will shine again, or the world's going to save us, everything be happy. Again, I'm not worried about you guys who listen, but what about the person who's fat, dumb, and happy and thinks, oh, don't worry, the Fed's got our back, the economy is the best, we'll be fine. You guys are just Chicken Little, saying the sky is falling. It's not falling. It's going to be fine. So number 1 was Janet Yellen, Secretary of Treasury, also Fed chairman at one time, saying that the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and the Federal Reserve Bank will determine which banks live or die.
When being interviewed in a House subcommittee inquiry, the representative from Oklahoma said, Madam Secretary, you just bailed out Signature Bank, and you just bailed out the depositors at Silicon Valley Bank. Now, if one of my constituents in Oklahoma, who has $5 million in a regional bank, goes bankrupt, will that depositor be bailed out? And she said, no, sir, they won't be. It will have to be determined by an uber majority, as she termed it, between the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, myself, and the president. So in essence, what she was saying is that if you have money, any of the banks that are not systemically too big to fail, then you better get it out, because they will fail and you will be bailed in, and there's nothing that you've been warned. And the question then becomes, which banks are too big to fail? Which banks are systemic? So she lit a fuse under literally 5,000 banks in this country that have been the cornerstone of the small businesses. And it's a very, very frightening situation for most of these people. Well, not really preparing for the worst, or yanking their money out and moving it into one of the large commercial banks, which she's telling us will not fail.
So that's emergency podcast number 1. Please understand that. Question is your money safe in a bank? Or is it going to be stolen by the bank? It's called a bail-in.
People are terrified right now, and they don't know where to turn. Some are turning to precious metals, and others are turning to short-term government treasuries, and others are moving to the big banks. But the amount of money being yanked out of these regional banks, which is going to have a domino effect, is extraordinary. And that's what we talked about in the first podcast.
And podcast number 2, it's about what Japan and Mexico, if and when they join the BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, and on and on and on. But if you have Japan and Mexico, who are possibly as close to us as Canada, joining the opposing side, that's number 2. What's the significance of Japan and Mexico contemplating or already joining the BRICS?
So Mexico has formally applied. The rumor is Japan, Australia, and New Zealand are contemplating. what it really symbolizes is that the United States and their actions have done more to destroy themselves in the past few years than any external enemy could have ever done, because we weaponize our source of power, which is the US dollar. And we have driven most of the world away from it as a result. And the majority of the world's populations that comprise the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Belt Road Initiative, and the Eurasian Economic Union, this bullying group of people that are rallying together against this type of bullying and the perception of hypocrisy. What really does that mean if we lose the petrol reserve status?
America has been violating all of these laws of money for all these years, and the world says we've had enough of this. So they're joining the BRICS. That means 70% of the world's population that used to use the dollar are going to say, we don't want it anymore. And so there's going to be quadrillions of dollars coming back. And the ramifications of that are possibly, and I hope it doesn't happen, but it's called hyperinflation. That this thing goes to trash. This becomes toilet paper. And when 70% of the world's population says, we're not going to use this anymore, aloha, what does that mean to the world? Which brings up number 3. It's the Wiley Coyote moment. And I showed this clip here. Well, you want to talk about what the possibility is, or how far away are we from the Wiley Coyote moment?
Those of you who are holding dollars, you surely might go into losses. You better do what you must do, because this market is going to be different in a couple of weeks. Through the central bank, we are having conversations to reinstate the interbank exchange market that has since not worked.
Speaking during the listing of lab trustee Mara rate at the Nairobi Securities Exchange NSE, President William Ruto directed that moving forward, all oil brokers will not hoard dollars, as the government will now be making purchases of oil using Kenyan shilling.
What was he saying there, Andy?
So what he was basically saying is you need to get out of dollars and you need to do it quicker. And that if you don't, the whole market is changing. And what he was basically saying is get out of dollars. When you see that in conjunction with purchasing oil from the UAE and from Saudi Arabia in Kenyan shillings instead of dollars, this is a very, very ominous sign. And how it all affects this moment when the world snaps their fingers and no longer takes dollars for oil. The ramifications of that are extraordinary. If the dollar collapses and all those dollars come flooding home and interest rates spike to the moon, everything in this country changes in the blink of an eye. Not only are the 3 pillars of wealth, stocks, bonds, and real estate, inversely correlated to a rise in interest rates, and we're not talking about a 25 or 50 basis point interest rate hike. And you can see just raising interest rates to 4.5% has already almost broke the entire world financial banking system. But I'm talking the world dumping dollars globally because they no longer need to hold it to own oil. It's terrifying because everything that makes people feel wealthy in this country is inversely correlated to that moment. The de-dollarization, the lack of demand for the dollar, is going to increase inflation exponentially.
When people are desperate people do desperate things. And we're getting there now. Chinese people building infrastructure. Then we're in, I forget the name of the country, but they were putting in fiber optic cable for the country, the Chinese. They're doing all the things that makes a country richer, but they're countries with resources. Do you know what I mean? With stuff that the Chinese want to use. So we send our cheap-ass dollars. We buy their, gold, silver, oil, copper. We pay them with fake money, but the Chinese go there and actually make their economy stronger via infrastructure. So when you see it, you go, what the hell is the U.S. doing?
The U.S., in essence, has stole the exchange reserves of Iraq, Iran, Venezuela, Afghanistan, and Russia to the tune of trillions of dollars, right? Through sanctions and whatnot and war. And by the way, the president of Venezuela just said the exact same thing that the president of Kenya said. The de-dollarization is real. The union of these countries against the West is real. And if and when they all dump dollars and the tidal wave of dollars come home, it creates a massive problem against everything in this country.
So what's going to come back is a tidal wave of this toilet paper upon America. Since 2008, they've been dropping interest rates. And then when they raise interest rates, the bonds started to explode because you have a bond that's paying 2%, and now a bond's paying 8%. The 2% bond collapses, the bank collapses, and that's what runs the bank company. But Deutsche Bank is derivative failure. And derivatives are what Warren Buffett calls weapons of mass financial destruction. And the derivatives market is 1 quadrillion. So we're not speaking about trillions anymore. We're speaking about quadrillions. And a quadrillion is 1,000 trillion.
And one thing, when you mention a quadrillion is 1,000 trillion, trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. So put that into your mix and try to figure that out. 31,000. So if you made a machine that printed dollar bills every second without stopping to reload paper or change ink, it would take 31,688 years to make 1 trillion. Multiply that times 1,000, the Earth wasn't even here. So this is why he calls it weapons of mass destruction. And I guess one very, very last thing, this is exactly why the Federal Reserve quietly, no one talks about this. Everyone talks about Signature Bank, Silicon Valley Bank, UBS bailing out Credit Suisse. But how about the fact that the second largest bank in the world, I believe they're called Swiss Bank Corporation, was given a $20 billion lifeline by the Federal Reserve a few weeks ago. $20 billion. Why? Exactly what you just said. The derivative exposure, the incestuous commingling of derivatives between all of these banks and corporations and funds, where the value of those derivatives is based upon the counterparty's ability to perform. Well, if a counterparty goes boom, what does that mean for the derivatives? And everyone has derivatives with everyone else. It's a daisy chain that brings them all down. It's a very frightening thing. And this is exactly why holding physical precious metals is not an investment. It's wealth that is not simultaneously someone else's liability. And a derivative is exactly the opposite of that. Its value is based upon the counterparty's ability to make good. And so having that removal of liability and of counterparty risk, I believe, will be the biggest single topic of discussion in the months and years ahead, because we have found ourselves in a system that just can't survive under the conditions that are approaching.